Power creep happens in every live service game. It's when a new unit appears to be very strong, making older units seem less usable. Some people don't like it while others don't give a damn about it. Why does power creep happen? How much of this is a problem, and what can game developers do about it? That's everything that I want to discuss in today's video, so let's get to it. Now, for every update patch of any live service games, developers are always stressed to keep their content engaging and worthwhile, whether for older players to look forward to, or for newer players to see that the hype is increasing and giving them reasons to possibly join the game. Or you can always try to exceed your previous update by making a character look more beautiful or giving them a better storyline. Usually, the gameplay factor is the most important, meaning that the developers must consider the strength of the unit. They do try to balance this factor by making sure that the units are good at a certain few roles in the game and then not as great in other roles, so that when you compare units side by side, you can see that, oh, this unit is good in situation A, and if it's situation B, they're not as great, but the older one can perform better in a situation B context. That helps to make sure that new units are looking powerful, but not something that overtakes the game. But that's where the power creep problem comes in, because there are times that games like to release units where it just seems that they are good at so many different factors that when you compare it to someone else that was long in the game, they seem to just do everything much better than them, like they have no flaws. The reason to release overly busted characters is fairly obvious. It's a business strategy. It's to keep players super interested in the game, to see that, oh, I can have this powerful unit that can make my game easier or make my game more fun, and that will make them spend money or whatever in-game currency that they have in order to get that unit. Once a unit is considered a power creep, that's where some problems start to arise. Live service games can be split into two broad categories: competitive and single-player games, and the type of problems are a little different for the two. In the case of competitive games, meaning you are battling someone else, whether in a team format or just 1v1, this becomes an issue when, if you want to perform well as a player, you start to receive the need to own this super busted unit so that you can have an advantage over your opponent. Whereas if you are battling your opponent who has this unit, you're gonna feel like you're at a disadvantage because they look like they have a higher power ceiling than you do. Eventually, this becomes a situation for PvP games where the players who want to be the tip-top best will all try to own the best units, and then this becomes the meta. Basically, everybody wants to own this exact same composition in order to play at the utmost level. The most apparent case of this is in the form of Apex Legends, where if you look into their competitive scenes, Apex Legends is a 3-man team game, and usually the 3 roles or units that each player selects are just about the same across any team. Power creep in such games is typically solved by developers always delivering balancing patches. They will take the time to review the units that appear a lot in the competitive context, and then they will consider to give nerfs towards the more often used units and buffs to the less often used units. There is always that need to make sure the game environment is healthy, because otherwise the PvP experience wouldn't be that great. I'm still wondering when will Riot Games nerf K'Sante in LOL, because he's not been a nice viewing experience during the live tournaments.
이게 그산타다. 체력 4700, 방어력 329, 마저 201인 챔피언이 저지불가, 실드, 병 넘기는 거 있고요. 그 다음에 공격력 개수가 있어가지고 W가
Anyways though, let's talk about the single player games. Single player games that are live service would usually be the gacha games, and it's quite clear cut why there will be situations of power creep. You tend to see it during a mega event like an anniversary, and sometimes even in off-season events where a super strong powerful unit appears, again so that they can get the money. No one likes to see a poor boring unit appear in any update of such gacha games, but there are also people who wouldn't like it if a character looks very powerful. And that comes to the question of, can we solve the gacha game side of things the same way that competitive games do, where you nerf certain units and then you make other units stronger as well? The answer to this is that gacha game companies tend to not care, because if they were to buff older units, which a lot of people would have tried to pull, usually it's just the newer ones or the people who missed out on it that didn't get that unit. If they were to make that unit stronger or closer towards the new units, this might make people less tempted to spend or pull for that newer one, And that comes to the problem of, again, the revenue for the company, because every single update is needed for their profits. So, while power creep is inevitable in gacha games, how much of it is actually a problem? Clearly, it's a big issue in PvP, that's why the need for balancing, but with no need for balancing in gacha games, how much does this affect the player's experience? My answer to this is that it depends on the state of the game. If the newer content, the new enemies, stages, very much requires the new stronger units to clear it, such that if you try to use the older ones, you won't be able to do so, that to me is a problem. Because that's like the developers saying, if you don't get these new boys and girls, you won't be able to go on into the game. Older units will obviously have to struggle as compared to the new flashy one-time click and everything disappears kind of units. But as long as it just means that you need a bit more time and effort in order to make them work in the new content, that to me is okay. It's kind of like presenting yourself a challenge that yes, you don't have the newest easy buttons, but as long as you appreciate your older units, you understand how they work and you can still move on in the game, that I think is fine. But that's also where some people start to argue when they bring up the topic of endgame. Basically the very hardest content in the game. Those are the kinds that it seems like as if you want to use some of the obviously weaker units, you're not gonna get far in the game, and you will typically need the bestest of the best in order to reach your highest risk in contingency contract, clear off your spiral abyss, go into the deep ends of various kind of game modes in all the gacha games. I think the idea of endgame, as the name suggests, is meant to be the limits of the game, and it's usually created in a way where the highest, bestest ends of the units are meant to be the ones to challenge that. And a lot of players might feel like, oh, if I can't clear this highest content that the game can deliver, does that make me worse off as a player? Which I really don't think that's how people should see to it, because that is pretty much how the game tries to make you pay more into the game, right? It's not so much of your skill anymore if you need certain units in order to clear off that level of content. It's more about, do you have the money and do you have the time investment built into the character to reach that point of the game. Of course, there's going to be skill elements still at the end part, because how do you time your units well? How do you combo your attacks? All that sort of things, you still need to consider even with the best units in the game. But most certainly the requirements, as I said, is going to be higher for such content, and while it is a very sour feeling for such players pursuing that extent, I don't think it's meant to be something that we need to be so upset about, because the nature of the game simply is as such. But at the same time, I do think it's gonna be good to challenge this concept where, oh, end games can only be defeated by the bestest of units. You've seen YouTubers and even other not as popular players trying to challenge it with much lower requirements, and to me, that are the kind of achievements that are even more impressive to see in the gaming community. I think I might be on the other side of the argument, where I say that power creep isn't that much of an issue. Understandably, it is a problem in certain games, but for a lot of them, I might even say that it's a good thing. As I've mentioned, the older players, it's up to them whether they want to consider that challenge of using their older units to still be viable in the later stages. And for newer players as well, if they're just coming into the game, they are rolling on the new banners, even trying to re-roll, those newer, stronger units can help to boost these new players to get through the early game, the mid game, so that they can experience the same extent of the players that have played the game for a very long time. Basically, power creep is pretty much just there in order to make your game feel easier. For the endgame players, yes, it might now look like you need them if you want to also have an easier time in the endgame. But like I said, I think there's even more impressiveness if you try to refuse these new stronger units and simply just do it like a chat and use all the older, weaker ones and show the world that you are definitely a great player. So that's my perspective to power creep. I know some of you might feel very strongly to it, so I want to hear all that sort of arguments within the comments so that I can see how everybody thinks of it in the various games that you play. So let me know down in the comments, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.